Welcome to Inside Personal Growth Podcast. Deep dive with us as we unlock the secrets to personal development, empowering you to thrive. Here, growth isn't just a goal, it's a journey. Tune in, transform, and take your life to the next level by listening to just one of our podcasts. Oh, well, welcome back to Inside Personal Growth. From Williamsburg, Virginia, joining me today is Christopher Phillips. Now, Christopher was on Inside Personal Growth for his book called Socrates Cafe. Was that the title of the book? Did I get that right? Or no?
Talked about Socrates Cafe and my book Child at Heart.
Yeah. So we had an interview years ago from my listeners, and I've always been transformed by Christopher's work. And so I'm going to let the people know just a tad bit about you. If you want to learn more about Christopher, you can go up to Amazon and there's a bio there. And is there a website for you, Christopher, that you would direct people to?
Oh, yes. At just ChristopherPhillips.com, Phillips with L's, or SocratesCafe.com.
Okay.
There'll come lots of things.
So you can go to his personal website, which is Christopher, ChristopherPhillips.com, and you can learn more about him there. Well, he is, they say, the greatest living embodiment of the Socratic spirit in our catastrophic times. His global grassroots movement of the Socratic or Socrates Cafe and democracy cafes have transformed the lives of millions of people in every continent on the earth. And I would say definitely so. His brilliant and wise books have touched the minds and souls of so many of us. And his soulful style and genuine compassion have enriched the lives that are so fortunate to have read his work. When the historians write of the ugly and the beautiful in our turbulent age, the Socratic words, work and deeds of my dearest brother Christopher Phillips should loom large, and that's from Dr. Cornel West, professor of philosophy and Christian practice. He travels the world holding dialogues with people of all walks of life. He believes that the process of dialogue and the space of human interaction are good for us and individuals and essential for us as a society. His goal is to inspire curiosity and wonderment. It says wonder, but I call it wonderment of the transformative sort, one of the nature's self-discovery, openness, and empathy. And that's what this book talks about. So why don't we dive right in? You know, your journey started on the island of, is it Nikos?
Nisyros, Greece. It's one of the 12 Dodecanese islands in the South Aegean, where my grandparents were from. Immigrated not once, but twice through Ellis Island to the United States. And I brought things full circle by when I became a citizen of Greece, as well as the U.S. And I try to go back at least once a year. And I feel
so how has that heritage, that Greek upbringing and heritage, influenced your philosophical pursuits in writing? Because you have quite an educational background and quite a writing background. And now you're going to be writing a new book about how it relates to the financial services kind of industry, which was a new twist to me because I knew nothing about you going down that direction. But how has that influenced, is being born there, being raised by parents there, grandparents, really kind of influenced you to write what you've written about?
That's a really good question. You mentioned my degrees. I have all these formal educational degrees, and but everything about philosophy I really learned at the knees in many ways of my Greek relatives, especially my yaya, Calliope, Kavazarakis Philippou. They
so your grandmother,
yes,
Gemma, yeah,
who is they left their little island. To this day, when it's not tourist season, it's tourist season right now, the population is less than 1,000. Greece has thousands of islands, and they left Nisyros because Mussolini's minions had taken over the island. She could no longer teach Greek in the schools, And so she came to the United States and twice. She didn't like it. And she went back, and then her husband went, my namesake, Philip, that's my first name, went and got her and brought her back. But she then opened her own school of Greek language and culture in the Tampa Bay region of Florida. She threw herself into it. So, and she taught me so much in a way I would have never learned in formal schooling. In a way, it made it almost impossible for me to ever acclimate myself to academic philosophy. All my degrees, my bachelor's at William & Mary, my 3 masters, and my PhD, they're not in philosophy proper. Instead, I took this Renaissance approach, just like you take to all the amazing people you interview, with this sort of open curiosity. And so I use that to filter my Socratic thinking through. Because to my grandmother, these words that are used in academia, arete, it's translated as excellence or virtue. To her, they're not just words, they're spirits. They're strivings. So we're always trying to become more excellent, more virtuous, more open, more kind, more empathetic, more courageous. So that's how I learned about these terms, and the more ossified, desiccated way that they're taught never spoke to me really. And so
it's interesting you say that, Christopher, because I have a book by Brian Johnson behind me here called Arete. And if you know anything about Brian Johnson, you may or may not know him, I don't know, but he's basically taking the Socratic principles and methods and philosophy and put it into it's quite a volume. It's about 400 and something pages long. But it is a wonderful work. But we're here to talk about the soul.
Oh, I want to meet this fellow kindred spirit.
He definitely. I'll introduce you to Brian.
Please.
And I'll put you 2 guys together because, he would be somebody for years. Now, I want you to hold up the book, the Soul of Goodness book, which I know is right behind you, because we're here to talk about this book in a way that people can understand not only why they'd want to buy a copy, but the reality is so that they can get an idea of what's in it. So you explore transforming hurt and betrayal into love and compassion. And it happens in everybody's life, I'd say, hurt, betrayal. Can you share a personal experience that inspired you to write about that in the book? Because I'm reflecting on, he was never on the show, but I'm trying to blank, The Hero's Journey. Okay. And I'm saying Joseph Campbell was somebody who, when we go on this journey out in life, like you have, like I have, these things are bound to happen. Things good and bad will happen to us. And you write about being able to transform this and turn it into love and compassion. And I want to know what your take is on that.
Well, there's degrees of loss, there's degrees of betrayal, there's degrees of hurt. This was the first book I wrote that I had never planned to write, but that I had to after the death of my father, Alexandros Phillips. His own father died when he was just 7 years old, soon after they immigrated to the U.S., and he became man of the family. He had taught himself to play piano by ear, played boogie-woogie music at dance halls and taverns, 7, 8 years old. Delivered groceries, hawked newspapers on the street corner. He had this never say die spirit. He ultimately became this chief executive for the Department of the Navy, rose way up, oversaw the construction, electrical systems in the nuclear aircraft carrier fleet in Newport News, Virginia. And so it was a really painful, arduous loss when those who were with my dad at the end never even let me know that he had died. By the time I got there and other honest people got there, most of his belongings had been removed. Most careful saver and planner. My dad sold mutual funds, America funds, when he was working as studying to be a ship designer in his 20s. He was always an astute investor, saver, planner, but everything, poof, disappeared. And so, and then there were so many ugly acts that still unfold to this day.
So your book, in essence, this betrayal is a betrayal that was kind of released, or I should say, brought upon by something that happened with your father and so on. And I heard that at the beginning of our discussion as well. And I want to just acknowledge that and say that I'm sorry that happened. But if you can help others heal as a result of this, because your experience is not uncommon. I've heard this more than
Not
once.
I mean,
Right.
look at the world news today. So
Right.
many families are suffering unspeakable loss. Their
Right.
lives shattered forever. So many people die of preventable illness. Tens and tens and tens of millions are caught in the middle of conflicts, not of their creation. They just want to be able to raise their family, educate their families, protect their families. When you can't do that, when you can't protect your loved ones, it's got to be the most tragic sense of hurt. And you feel that you betrayed them. And that's how I sort of feel with my father. The point is, okay, for those of us who are lucky enough to survive these slings and arrows, we're still standing. If you can withstand, you're being just, all these acts you're being buffeted, backpedaling. What can you do? My background's as a philosopher, I'm not a psychologist. What kinds of insights can I offer those who are suffering any type of reversal, setback, loss? Because there's many types of grieving. What can we do to channel those things from a philosophical standpoint to move forward and to carry those on our shoulders who we've lost in ways that aren't heavy but are light, that would have them, cheering us on and rooting us on, regardless of our religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs. So my teachings from my yaya, my vast readings and my 28 years worth of Socrates cafes around the world sort of were the cauldron that tested me to see what I had to bring to this, and how not only I could survive, all the while trying to keep my family safe. I have a very young family, a 10-year-old and 17-year-old. I did everything late in life. But what spirits can we harness that can help us move forward in ways that also can serve as models and guides for other people who are going through other kinds of loss, but nonetheless, we're all now part of that family of survivors of loss, whatever that may happen to be. And so I write about the constellation of Socratic spirits that, again, these are things that I learned starting when I was around 5 years old. My yaya didn't, the big famous phrase of Socrates is the unexamined life is not worth living. But given what happened to him, what he was really saying was the examined life is worth dying for. Put it all out there. You leave nothing. You just give everything you got. You never know when your mortal moment's going to end, and so you just leave it all out there. And so Yaya taught me that there's this constellation of spirits. They're not these rigid definitions that people talk about. Eudaimonia, software sign, our daemon, our inner voice. They're all weaved together, interlaced, interspiced, so that we can achieve a kind of wisdom that always is imbued with empathy.
How have you say this is a deep moral exploration, but I want to know, arete and sophrosyne. You say these ancient Greek philosophies, gods have influenced your views, and I want to know how they influenced it on modern challenges, because we're going back thousands of years here, right? The reality is we're living in 2024, be it, in my estimation, I think some of the most exciting times that in my time on this planet that we're being lived in, although challenging to say the degree, but also exciting because we all have a lot of opportunity from it. How do you take a look at that? What is your philosophical viewpoint on that? And how do we take this, as you say it, in the soul of goodness, this deep moral exploration?
I mean, I think every action should be imbued with a moral compass, ethical compass. I try to take a long view. My actions are not meant to just be ones that impact this generation or even 5 generations, but I try to think 100 generations hence, 500 generations hence. You know, we're on the cusp, as you said, of so many things. So these are times of great darkness and times of extraordinary light. We have choices to make, and we each can set an example. I truly believe, and that's why I started Socrates Cafe in 1996, was it's so easy to point the finger at others, at politicians for polarization or whatever. But we have to look at ourselves and say, what are those of us who are privileged enough to be in a position to do so? What can we do to be some of the change that we can see? Recognizing that none of us has a cure-all, that there's many complementary approaches to everything that we do. I mean, I feel like you're a total kindred spirit, for instance. So there's so many of us fighting the good fight. In the case, since my father's death, I mean, I started a new project called Cafe for Shakespeare. That'll be another book that I'll have. It takes some of the... Cornel West, who wrote the foreword to Soul of Goodness, said, you know, Chris, you have a Shakespearean soul. And I hadn't shared with him anything that had happened yet about my father's tragic loss. And so I took some of Shakespeare's key questions from plays that were posed by his characters, and I'm journeying around the world asking those to people who also participate typically in Socrates Cafe. I became an investment advisor representative for martincapital.com because it was just this serendipity. When he became a member of our nonprofit board, we became friends. I told him about what my dad did, and that initially, after graduating from William & Mary, I was going to get my MBA at the University of Virginia, and also in following his footsteps in the investment area. But I decided to become a writer instead, and I chucked that for a $50 a week job in Maine. But so, investing with a social conscience, I specialize in environmental social governance investing, social responsible impact investing. And so you and I are kindred in that too.
Impact investing, I think, is impact investing. And I mean, listeners, if they haven't yet, and the gentleman resides, I think, back east someplace, is a new PBS series. I think it's a 6-part series called A Brief Look at the Future. And I think when you really see this, and the reason I bring this up is because the documentary is done so fantastic. I encourage everyone to go see it. Now, you said you weren't looking to write this book, and I know that you weren't. This came as a result of your dealing with the grief and loss as a result of your dad's passing, and really all the other extenuating circumstances, which you have explained a little bit about. How has this changed, or has it, your philosophical outlook and direction kind of with relation? Because it sounds like there's a real unique opportunity here for you to grow, and a unique opportunity for you to relay this lesson to many of my listeners about how to bring more goodness in their life, the soul of goodness, more compassion, more love. Because the first thing that happens, that I think happens, and I've had it happen to me, so I'll just say this, is when you're hurt and betrayed, there's this whole vengeance thing that comes up, right? Like, I want to have vengeance on this person, whoever did this to me, because it isn't right. It wasn't morally right. It wasn't ethically right. There wasn't anything right about it. Speak about that, if you would.
Yes, that's a beautiful way of putting things, because, so much of my guidance, again, comes from my father's example. He never felt sorry for himself when his father died when he was just 7 years old. Never. No woe was me. He had this never say die spirit. And so that latched on with me and imprinted with me. And so ultimately over time, and took some, it's still every day is still a challenge. Dr. Robert Coles, who was a dear friend who supported my work, who wrote the Children in Crisis series, he points out that every day People are suffering so much and you don't even know it. So many people who take their lives, you go, I didn't even know he was going through something like that. People hide it so well. One person who has been through tragedy said to me, just imagine how the person who was with your father, just imagine how empty and hollow that person is, to do those things. And it resonated with me because it's like, I have to become more Chris Phillips than ever. This is the real test. And so I did. I started channeling these, now I recently became a philosopher in residence for the Humanity in Deep Space program. That's at humanityindeepspace.com. So, again, there's many of the conflicts, the not good ones in the U.S. and elsewhere around the world, are platforms for getting us to steer our gaze farther afield more quickly than we otherwise might have anticipated.
Well, and I also think that, this whole threat, you talk about democracy cafes. People are perceiving much of what's going on as a threat to democracy. And I guess this is, look, Socrates Cafe is about talking about things, just like what you and I are talking about here. How is this democracy cafe kind of contributed to the theme of your book, or the themes of your books? Because
yes,
this is a fundamental, I'm going to just call it right, that everybody should have in this world, which is democracy, which it doesn't exist, but that's in a perfect utopian world. Do you believe in this country, speaking with most of our listeners are here in North America, we do have them worldwide, but what would you like to say about this Democracy Cafe?
Well, it's been interesting because in the last 2 years, there's been a level of polarization that almost makes me nostalgic for the polarization that existed in '96 when I started. It's time for each of us to stand up and be counted more than ever. If we want freedom of expression for ourselves, maybe we want it also for those whose views we find sometimes repugnant. Maybe it behooves us more than ever to become more careful, empathic listeners. If somebody says a comment, political perspective that pushes a button, instead of just pushing back and getting a knockdown, drag out, find out why they're coming from where they're coming from. Why do you think that? What's your story? I mean, to me, everything's about story. And so let's just learn from each other. Just, so many people are used to pushing your buttons. If you actually just say, well, why do you think that? And they see that it can be transformative for you and that person. Because suddenly you stepped out of the argumentative frame and you're more into the meditative storytelling, narrative frame. And I've found again and again that people who come quite often to vet and yell at, scream, as soon as we step back and genuinely ask them a question out of heartfelt curiosity, why do you hold this view? Where'd you get it from?
I think one of those things is we should seek to understand. And be understood. And be understood, right? So in other words, that's an old statement, but the point is that there is a lot to that where don't seek to understand, because we've created this divisiveness as a result of a belief that's so strong, that runs so strong in us, that we take this opposing viewpoint, I want to speak for the disenfranchised white male in the world who is feeling that Donald Trump is the savior and is going to vote for them. As a result, I can say what the hell I want on this show. It's my show. So that's the point. That's what I'm saying, is that the mind, are we seeking to understand, quote, and it's a lot of people, but I'm going to use this paraphrase, the disenfranchised white male. It is interesting because there isn't a lot of diversity.
I mean, one of the things that I praised my professors at the College of William and Mary for was that they nudged us out of our comfort zones. They didn't care in the slightest if we agreed or disagreed with them. What they cared about was that we supported our points of view well, that we brought a lot of things to the table.
Yeah.
And so that, that's why I acknowledge them in my books because they modeled what I hope to be. It's one thing to be able to get your point of view across, but it's another thing if you really not just allow somebody to have their say, but really seek to open yourself up to why people come at things from such a different slant and perspective than you. At the end of the day, democracy can also be about argument. It has to be about debate.
Right.
You win the day, you lose the day, you dust yourself off, and you get back in there. And you don't hate the person who's you're opposed to.
I know that Christopher in there is this PBS is doing it again. They're bringing opposing views into a room and then interviewing. They're letting the two groups talk. Now, you could call this the Democracy Cafe, really, if you wanted to. And I forget what the title of this thing is, but it is surprising the way people shift and their differences in belief as a result of engaging in this dialogue that's occurring inside these rooms that are actually being videoed. I forget it's called the American something or another. You probably know it. I'm sure you've run across it. But this gentleman who started this on PBS is perpetuating it through these almost, I'm going to call them democracy cafes. It's like, okay, here we go. And when you watch the videos back, it's really something what happens at the end when people walk away.
In the kinds of tens of thousands of dialogues I've held, much more often than not, people who are sure that they're on polar opposites, they discover uncommon common ground.
Uncommon common ground. I like that.
A methodical pursuit of not just saying what you already know that you think, but by giving birth, what we call the maieutic, to views that you didn't even know you had, that you harbored within. And there's these wow moments. That's the reason I'm still so jazzed about holding Socrates cafes, Constitution cafes, my newest cafe for Shakespeare, because I learned so much about myself. And I ask, I go into maximum security prisons. I ask myself, if just for a move here and a move there, it might have been me. I leave with greater humility. I leave with a greater sense of courage. I have to sign forms sometimes when I go into prison saying if I'm held hostage, they don't have to necessarily negotiate for my relief.
I'm sure.
There's some things, but the whole idea to me on a Socratic journey, which is in the shape of a question mark, is discovery of the surprise in the novel. So, for instance, we might talk about whether the United States troops should be in Afghanistan. And so people get in this loggerheads, knockout, drag out, back and forth. And then I'll say, well, what is a just war? And they step back, whoa. Because then they have to articulate their philosophy of what a just war is. And though they may have diametrically opposite examples of what constitutes a just war, they may have a remarkably similar, if not identical, philosophy behind what that is. So that discovery of uncommon common ground, giving ourselves the time and space to learn the art of artfully framed questions, and listening with all of our being at a time and clime when colleges offer classes on rhetoric, debate, forensics, persuasion. What about a dedicated class just on the art and science of listening? Because I think what the world needs now is a world of more empathic, careful listeners. So we have a chance to share our stories.
Yeah, compassionate listening too. It's compassionate. You could call it empathic. Yeah, I think certain people can do that, but I think just listen to listen and do it with compassion and an open heart.
Yes.
The other thing is this book that we're speaking about here, the soul of goodness. Now I want to ask, I'm going to put a compound question together because I seem to be good at that. What do you want the readers to take away after they've read this book? If there was 2 or 3 key points that you want to make, and then what is the legacy that you, because of Constitutional Cafe, Socrates Cafe, Democracy Cafe, what do you want to leave behind if I wrote your epitaph tomorrow?
Well, anybody who is suffering some sort of darkness in their lives, grief, loss, despair, betrayal of any sort, I believe that they can come to my book and discover, among other wise books, that this is a very unique approach to harnessing types of spirits that I share with them, that I learned at the feet of my grandmother, my great-grandmother, that will help them on their journey. I want them to know that as arduous as it is, there is light on the other side of the tunnel. And one of the ways that you can discover it is to discover for yourself, what can I do in my mortal moment? What can I do that's my way of not just saying I'm here, but that can make a difference with others as well? Because everybody has a gift to offer. I believe that fervently. Many people who come to Socrates cafes over the years, that's been their springboard as they ask themselves, who am I? And more forward-looking, who can I still be? To taking on new projects and new initiatives, to becoming more immersed in the civic world. And because you have to have this hope that, this is just the beginning. Any experience can be the springboard for learning, for growing. And I don't mean that in a Pollyannish way. There's we have to struggle through many things, but that to feel that sense of kindred spiritedness with others, including with me. If they go to my ChristopherPhillips.com site, or SocratesCafe.com, there's a drop-down page where they can actually get a guide on what these Socratic spirits are that I'm talking about, that hopefully will also want them to really dive into the pages of Soul of Goodness. I think
you've got on there, pardon me, but you do have a link to the book, so people can buy that at Amazon and so on. You've got booking engagements, which is another place. You've got some Huffington Post posts that you've done, and features and essays. So I want to encourage my listeners, because this book is obviously the newest one, but he's got A Child at Heart, Constitution Cafe, Socrates in Love, 6 Questions of Socrates, which is the one that you and we actually did, Socrates Cafe, A Fresh Taste of Philosophy. And now, are these, just for my listeners, are your cafes still meeting all over the country and they can sign up from there?
They're expanding more than ever, which is so moving and humbling. There's over 500 groups. If people will just write to us by going to our website, the email's right there, any of these websites, and that we can set them up with a coordinator in specific parts of the globe. It's burgeoning now in the Middle East. 6 of my books just recently came out in Arabic, and they come out in Romanian. It's burgeoning more than ever. I just got this beautiful post when my book Socrates Cafe was published in Poland, where there's a mix of democracy cafes and Socrates cafes. I want to stress, though, that I probably learn more from children than anybody else. So I have 12 children's books, most of them published at least in English and Spanish, but a number of them also published in Greek and Japanese and Arabic and other language. But children are my best models for learning how to think not just in black and white and gray, but to think in the dazzling array of colors. They keep me honest in a way that no one else does. And so I seek out children and youth to engage with. Look at these kids in Montana who got the judge to issue this ruling about climate change. They were changes that they wanted to see in the world. They are movers and shakers. So my books reflect that, especially probably Worlds of Difference in Philosophers Club, and the ones that spring from that.
Well, you have a YouTube video out there that I want to direct, and we'll put a link in our blog to that. It's called A World Without Fences, How Socrates Cafes Connects Us. Dr. Christopher Phillips explores how Socrates dialogue can be used as a tool to bridge divide and have meaningful discussions. I'm going to put a link to that in our blog.
Oh, thank you.
And Christopher, we'll certainly do everything we can to support you. I appreciate you bringing it on. Will you hold the book up again for the listeners so that
in terms of legacy, I feel like even if once I started my first Socrates Cafe group, it was like, okay, if I get hit by a truck tomorrow, it's okay because I found my thing, spoke to others, and now that they'll carry the torch. So I just want to feel like, if somebody wrote something, it was Chris generally tried to be the change personally that he wanted to reflect in the world at large.
Well, that would be on your epitaph, which I asked you as part of that question. So you got it in there, and I appreciate you doing that, Christopher, and I appreciate your time today that you gave the listeners and myself to not only learn more about what happened with your father, but how you use that as a learning tool to then write a book and help so many other people that have dealt with betrayal and hurt. And I think the examples that you use in the book for all my listeners is a great way for you to learn how to deal with this better. However you choose to learn with it, it's your choice. But the only way to heal from it is through compassion and understanding. So kudos to you. I want to thank you again for another great book, another opportunity for us to speak. Let's not wait so long in between podcasts. Let's do another one, because I think this could be a good topic to speak about. And thank you for going into those prisons and doing what you're doing as well. I know another gentleman I'm going to hook you up with is doing the same thing. And so namaste to you. Kudos to you. Thank you
so much. It's always an honor to be on your program. Your curiosity and openness is a real example for me. I just bought a book because of you called Mind Magic.
Oh, yeah. Dr. Dottie. I'll introduce you to him.
Yes, but
I'll make an introduction.
Yes, but you really are a touchstone for me, and I'm very grateful to you.
Well, likewise as well. It was way too long for me to make the connection to get back to you, but I appreciate it, and all the success in the world to you at Martin Financial and doing what you're doing with what I'm going to call socially responsible investing. That is really, really the key to changing our world. And the more people that invest into it, the better off we're all going to be. And reach out to Christopher if you want on it through his website. If you're interested in learning more about socially responsible investing, and he certainly could help you with that as well, too.
Yes, martincapital.com is our website, and I'm one of the people in that list. You can go to my direct email right there. I just had another client this week, which was really beautiful. People trust me, thankfully.
Yeah. Well, they should.
Yes, but they know that they're in good hands. And so that ties in with everything, just about what can I do during my mortal moment to leave a bit more wood on the wood pile and make sure that we're all more cognizant of the losses and struggles and challenges of everyone else. And that you
are the soul. You are the soul of goodness. So
oh my God.
Yeah, just you. I mean, look, the title of the book really is who you are. So thank you again for being on the show. Thanks a bunch.
So much. That means so much to me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast on Inside Personal Growth. We appreciate your support. And for more information about new podcasts, please go to InsidePersonalGrowth.com or any of your favorite channels to listen to our podcast. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.